Welcome, zombie fans, to this week's episode of Reanimated, the podcast about all things undead. This is episode 42, and we've got some zombie news coming at you, as well as our review of In the Flesh, episode 5 in the second series. As always, this episode is brought to you by Squarespace, which is the all-in-one platform that makes it easy to create your own website. We use it for our website and our podcast. It's very easy to use. They have a lot of great options on there. So we encourage you to use that. And our friends at Squarespace have given us an offer code for our listeners, which is zombie. It's not case sensitive. Throw that in there and you'll get 10% off your first purchase. So thanks, Squarespace. As always, I am here with my intrepid co-host, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
Greetings, HA. How's it going?
It's going well. And I'm HA Conrad, hailing to you from Brooklyn today. Yeah, so how's things?
Things is great. It's been a hectic time. Lots of weddings.
Yes, I had a wedding as well, and there was a Game of Thrones themed groom cake at my wedding, and it was cut using a sword.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, but it was oddly compelling. So, I was like, all right, that's cool. So yeah, that was my weekend so far. It was good. And I was down in Austin, Texas, got to eat a lot of Tex-Mex and took in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes at the Alamo Drafthouse down there. So, all in all, a successful weekend.
Yeah, it sounds action-packed.
Yep, and I'm topping it off recording a podcast with you. So it's, couldn't be more perfect.
Aw.
How many weddings did you have to go to? More than one?
No, this is just the third one this summer, so it feels like it's one after another. I've got one more to go. And then...
Were any of them zombie or Game of Thrones themed? No?
Nope. This weekend was sort of Brooklyn themed, which would be up your alley.
How is it Brooklyn themed?
Only really the signature cocktail was called the G Train, and they had a hashtag that was G Train something. So they're all about the G Train, these kids.
Of all the trains to name things after, it's like the worst.
Does it go through Brooklyn at some point?
It does, and it goes through Williamsburg a bit. It's just one of those trains that whenever you try to catch it, it's never there, and it just always feels like you're waiting forever for it. So it's just kind of it's I don't know. It's kind of like a joke around Brooklyn, but maybe that's why they did it.
Yeah. Either way, but beyond the drink, that was really the only Brooklyn theme. That and a lot of Brooklynites were there, and so the general stylistic approach was heightened.
Was there a lot of facial hair and hipster type things going on?
No, not really.
No.
There was one guy was rocking a big handlebar, but yeah, that was nice actually. I appreciated that.
So what do we have for news related events today?
Looks like we've got a smattering. I think that we could define this as a smattering of news.
Yes.
The first off being a listicle from IO9, which is 13 tips for surviving a night in a cabin in the woods, which I thought was kind of appropriate since we recently reviewed a Cabin in the Woods, which also, in a way, is a play-by-play of, I don't know, well, how the game is stacked against you, really, but... And so I'll just quickly say what the 13 tips are. Number one is come prepared, which basically means like bring extra gas for your car, batteries, car keys, bring one extra of everything. Because, as I said, the game's stacked against you. So don't go to a cabin in the woods thinking that you only need one set of car keys or you don't need several tanks of gas in your trunk. Number two, do not insult anyone on your way to the cabin.
I think this is just generally a good tip for life.
You shouldn't just insult people anywhere, anytime.
It's just not a good idea. You never know who's going to turn out to be that scary soul that decides to take revenge on you.
Yeah.
So,
IO9 says, if someone is rude to you, just respond with polite obliviousness. And I think that's probably a good policy. Yeah.
right.
Park as close to the cabin as you can is number 3, because you want to have your car close for when you have to flee. Just, yeah, when you put this in the context of just like a normal trip to a cabin in the woods, that is not necessarily the plot of a horror film, this starts to sound a little bit insane, but all also good tips.
Hmm.
Bar all entrances to the basement immediately upon arrival. I cannot agree with this more. You should not stay in a place with an unfamiliar basement.
I would also say don't explore any of these sorts of secret passageways or entryways to the basement. Never ends well.
Number 5 is do not touch anything in the cabin. You'll likely see things left by the cabin's previous inhabitants. Pretend they are all covered with the Ebola virus. Do not read any journals, listen to any tapes, watch any home movies. All good advice. We've all seen Grudge,
Hmm.
or The Ring, or any of these films. Just stay away. Dress to repress is number 6. Dress like a Puritan, basically. No skin should be exposed at any time.
Nope.
Number 7, ignore the beds. Everybody should sleep in a circle in the living room.
Pretend it's a fun sleepover.
Number 8, set up a perimeter. Yeah, this sounds less and less like a vacation and more like you're just in a combat zone. Use
Right.
crumpled up newspaper or broken glass and scatter it around all the entry points so that you can hear when people approach.
Hmm.
Number 9, do not leave the cabin under any circumstances. When the shit hits the fan, your instinct will be to flee to your car. Ignore this. You're far safer in the cabin than you are traipsing through the woods in the dark. Mostly because you'll be sexually assaulted by an evil tree.
Ah, the evil tree.
Number 9, never ever leave the group for any reason. This is
Well, yeah,
self-explanatory. Never split up. You will not actually cover more ground if you split up.
you will
You'll die.
not.
Number 10, don't do anything lawfully or morally wrong. And yes, of course, no drugs, no sex. If you must engage in romantic physical contact with somebody, stick to medium to light making out. And for God's sake, do not approach second base.
Hmm.
Number 11, don't film anything. That's, just a hat tip to all of the mockumentary horror films out there like Blair Witch Project. Number 12, do not sleep. If you must sleep, sleep in shifts. That's why you have Red Bull and no-dose, people. So while you're staying in the cabin and not leaving and sleeping in a circle surrounded by broken glass, you should also not be sleeping. Note to self. And then finally, do not leave at first light. If somehow you've managed to survive the night and see the sun finally begin to peek up over the horizon, do not run outside to greet the day. People assume sunrise is the end of demonic/murderous festivities, but that's not true. Sure.
It is. It definitely isn't true.
No. It's a false hope. You're going to want to wait until about noon, is what IO9 says. Let the sun come up, banish the darkness, and hopefully the evil spirits will get bored and leave.
Hmm.
I don't know. What do you think? Is this list persuasive for you, HA?
I think it is. I kind of also like in the comments it said, and always bring this guy, and it has Bruce Campbell
Yeah.
with a chainsaw. Man, I haven't watched that film in so long. And I know this sounds, I'm just used to seeing him now. And he's so freaking young.
Yeah.
I know that's kind of obvious, but wow.
Wow. Indeed. Wow, indeed.
Yep. Yeah, I think these are some good tips to follow. But I think generally avoiding going to a cabin in the woods might be the better tip. Just saying. So, do you know what tonight is?
Let's see. Is it the night that everybody in Germany stays up all night partying because they just won the World Cup?
Well, it is that. It is that. But it is also the debut of The Strain on FX.
I am so excited for this. I'm going to stay up all night watching The Strain. I'll probably just watch that episode 100 times.
Yeah, it looks they've come out with some different trailers leading up to this, and they've been on all weekend, and I've been very, very excited. So I cannot wait to see this.
And it's also the Last Ship, episode 3 or 4 is on tonight too. And that show has been continuing to keep me interested. It's not like blowing my mind or anything, but it's good. It's good enough to watch.
Good enough to sit down and watch, huh?
Yeah,
That's a ringing endorsement.
I rate on the binary system. Either I'm not going to watch it or I'm going to watch it. So
Yeah, and in other sort of film news, you had mentioned that World War Z is now on Netflix, which I saw. I haven't rewatched it myself.
it's just so
So,
convenient now. Yeah, I rewatched it because they have two versions too. There's like a unrated or director's cut version, which I sat down and well, I kind of had it on in the background. So if there were significant additions, it didn't like impact me. I didn't notice, but I enjoyed it. I just enjoyed having it on. Like it's so well produced, and once the Israeli chapter starts and you get introduced to that badass bald chick, it's a good film.
yeah. Um, and we're looking at, I mean, the rumors have been swirling about a sequel for a while. It's going to be interesting to see if it actually moves forward. And you found something, just the most recent thing, which I think was in May, that they just
Yeah,
talked about it, that they're going to like go forward, but with a new writer. So,
because that's what this franchise needs is more writers.
yeah.
And this writer is not
Uh,
Max Brooks, just in case anybody had their hopes up.
yeah, I know. Not going to happen, I don't think. Um, so maybe we'll see something interesting come out of it, but we'll keep you posted on that.
But the names that they have associated with the project so far are, I believe it's a Spanish director by the name of Bayona, is I think his name. Where did it go? Juan Antonio Bayona. He might
Hmm.
not be Spanish, but that's certainly a name of the Spanish variety. And his former what he's done in the past was the docudrama Impossible, starring Ewan McGregor about the 2004 tsunami in Thailand and Indonesia. And then the more recent news is screenwriter Stephen Knight has been assigned or has picked up the project, and one of his previous projects was Dirty Pretty Things, which was an excellent film about, among other things, illegal immigrants in London, starring Audrey Tautou.
Hmm.
And yeah, her co-star is an actor whose name I can never say, but he was the agent in Serenity, and he's awesome.
Well, that's cool. I like him a lot.
Anyway, so that's some World War Z2 news. We'll see if it actually materializes. But after making $540 million worldwide, they've definitely, they might consider it to be a good investment.
Yeah. It wasn't my favorite, but I would watch the sequel.
Come on. Yeah, of course we would.
Speaking of, well, sequels to some extent, we are almost at the end of series 2 of In the Flesh.
Couple more to go, yeah?
One more after this, right?
Oh, I guess you're right. Yeah, episode 6 will be the last one. This is episode 5.
Yeah, and it's kind of bumming me out. And I keep looking for news that they are going to renew it, but not yet. So we shall see. It feels like they have a lot more ground to cover. But we'll see how they try to wrap it up in the next episode. But before that, I guess we should talk about episode 5 first, which there's a lot of interesting things going on in this particular one. So you ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's do this thing.
Cool. So where to begin? We have seen a lot of Simon in leading up to this episode, but we don't really know a ton about him and his background. He's made a couple of comments, but I would probably term this as the Simon episode.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot.
I
Well, we
mean,
get his flashbacks for sure.
we get his flashbacks, but I mean, just in terms of understanding a little bit more about his character and resolving some of the ambiguity, as you know, I've been suspect of some of his motives, but it was interesting to see some of the flashbacks. And I mean, he has been through an awful lot as a PDS sufferer, but also within these flashbacks, there was a lot of revelations about the rising, in my opinion. Some of the things that the doctors and scientists talk about. So we open up this episode with Simon in a hotel room, and he's waiting for another PDS sufferer. And I am assuming that this is the person he called, perhaps to tell them that he knew who the first Risen was. And the guy shows up and has a DVD from the Prophet. And the Prophet basically tells Simon that he has to kill Kieran in order to start the second Rising. So, and Simon is obviously upset about this news. He has some interesting moments with some wolf paintings on the wall that if you have wolf paintings on the wall, you're going to be very upset. That at least that was the gist I got from
This
this.
is yeah, this is a terrible choice for hotel art. I'm sorry. He's
And
got like
there was like 5 paintings of packs of wolves.
it's
So
just not a hotel room decoration that I would recommend.
no. And this DVD also falls in the hands of our favorite villain, Maxine Martin, because Gary manages to swipe it off of the other apostle
Because
that's
he's
coming out.
basically followed Simon to the city. Like this is
Hmm.
actually some kind of big deal shit for Gary. Like
Yeah.
he's on the road. He's spying on people. Kind of a big,
Yeah, I don't know if I buy that Gary would be this motivated or smart enough to pull this off. He seems to be drunk all the time. But okay, I'll give it to them. And obviously there had to be some way for Maxine to see the Undead Prophet
yeah.
DVD. So but in any case, I mean, Simon's reaction to the idea that he's going to have to kill Kieran is a lot more genuine than I thought. Because I guess I thought he had already had his orders before this point. I didn't know that he was still waiting for orders, so I felt like he was being somewhat manipulative and nefarious in his interactions with Kieran and his immediate switch from Amy to Kieran. So he redeemed himself a bit with me anyway. And then even more interesting was the flashbacks at the center, and we find out that Simon was basically the first PDS sufferer to respond to neurotyptaline, and he was a guinea pig. There are
Very willing guinea pig.
well, willing guinea pig. He comes to and he doesn't know what has happened to him. These doctors are super sketchy. There's Dr. John Weston and Dr. Victor Halperin. Nice little tip of the hat to White Zombie. With Victor anyway. Um, and they're basically experimenting on him, and he tells them that they can go ahead and do what they want to do. His one request is that his family not see him like this, whatever this is. And they're really, I mean, I would say John Weston is a bit more humane and sympathetic and empathetic. He's not just viewing them as things. And I think Dr. Victor Halperin is more kind of that evil scientist, like very, very disconnected, and he's treating them as lab
It
subjects.
was honestly surprising that they even asked Simon for his permission to continue doing tests, because that's one of the like big juxtapositions of this show is that some people seem to think of these people with PDS as people because they're sentient reasoning beings, and other people refuse to see them that way and just want to treat them as rotters and and things to be like things without that morals should not apply to. And so it's kind of surprising that the sorry Weston, is that the doctor, that
Well,
he's even willing to ask Simon for his permission.
well, he seems much more. He's viewing this to me. He's viewing this as a disease, and these are victims of the disease.
Yeah.
And you got a little bit of Walking Dead attitude there, which is interesting. But then the other doctor, Dr. Halperin, he is not viewing it that way. He seems much more interested in the science of it and seeing what they can do. And he's definitely a lot more negative and a lot more, cold about everything. So it's an interesting group of scenes. And I mean, even though Simon has agreed to do this is a very painful process. It's pretty horrific.
Well, he doesn't
Um,
feel pain, which is another thing. It's like
well, he doesn't.
his eventual decision to I don't want to do this anymore is not driven by discomfort, I assume, as much as it is by philosophical differences with the treatment.
Well, maybe, but it's also when they're doing the current and the current's up too high. I mean, is it not pain? Because he seems to be pretty upset by it.
Yeah, which I don't really understand then, Like, okay, I get it.
Well, they can feel pain. I mean, their eyes bother them and stuff like that. And maybe if they're totally jacking into that specific part of the brain, maybe that is how you get that kind of a reaction. I don't know, but it didn't seem as if it was not painful.
Yeah. I think if you run
So,
current through tissue, it's going to have that kind of rigor mortis or whatever effect anyway. Like it might, it looks the same as the reaction any human would have if they were had a lot of volts going through them. I don't know. Like it's to me it's a bit of storytelling gray area. I'm not sure. I feel like I'm supposed to think that he's in pain, but at the
well,
same time,
that's why I wanted to talk to you about it because I was
yeah,
kind of like I thought the same thing, and then I'm like, but yeah, this does not seem like it's not painful. Maybe it's just shocking and upsetting because he's getting, I mean, and while he's in this wonderful over overstimulated state, he starts hearing voices of the undead prophet. And the undead prophet is basically saying, um, why are you letting yourself be used like this? You're a guinea pig. You should leave and be with your own kind and that kind of thing. And it's that super creepy modified voice. It's it's a little weird. I've kind of been feeling all this time that the undead prophet is actually not a PDS sufferer, but somebody from the government.
it still could be.
And but this was weird. I was trying to figure out how he was even hearing this voice, and it's not clear how he is. And this is where, in the center is where he also first meets this other apostle, and I'm forgetting the person's name, which
Yeah,
is not good of me.
I don't remember either.
Um, but in any case, there's also a ton of religious imagery and mention within this episode. Much of the episode, especially in Simon's flashbacks, he's looking very Christ-like to me. Not quite as much as a True Detective Christ-like look, but he's looking like he's on a crucifix on the lab
Yeah,
table.
yeah.
And then
There's a lot of Christian parallels being drawn in this episode, obviously.
well, and even just in what they say. And one of the most interesting things about the flashbacks here is that we see the system, especially in series one, when Kieran gets reintroduced to his family, and the process by which the PDS sufferers are reintroduced to the community. But this is early days, and they had promised Simon that he wasn't going to have to see his family, and then they throw him into doing it and say he has to do it, and don't give him the heads up that the dude ate his mom, which that's probably something you should have given him, a bit of a warning about, don't you think?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They should have given him some heads up, but in a way, they're just interested in seeing his reaction and what effect that'll have on him. This emotional response.
Yeah, maybe, but
Yeah,
I still thought it was, and I guess that's to the point that they're not really viewing them as human.
yeah,
And John Weston has definitely a little bit more of a, like, he's much more sympathetic to the PDS sufferers. He's very concerned about, he's actually very honest about the fact that they don't really know what's going on here. And this whole conversation between the scientists while they're watching Simon interact with his dad for the first time is the first time that they've really indicated that there's something supernatural actually was what happened, or they think it may be supernatural. Um, and we also see Giles Weir, which we have not seen since the first series. So and I'm, just with his introduction, I'm wondering if perhaps he is the undead prophet at this point. So, do you remember him from the first series?
I remember an MP coming to town and getting
Yeah.
booed out. Yeah,
My thought when he went into the town and sort of was telling people that they need to be accepting of the PDS sufferers and all that fun stuff was that he was a bit of just a kind of idiotic bureaucrat. I didn't really think that he would have this much involvement, but he's obviously been there, and holds a lot more power than I initially than was my impression.
this honestly was an annoying scene for me because they very circuitously come up with the name for PDS. They're like the Halperin doctor's like, you might call it a syndrome, And then the politician's like, it's almost like they're partially dead. And they're like,
Yeah, it
no,
was
it's deceased. And then, oh, yes, partially deceased. Yes, and it might be a syndrome. Oh, okay, that's fantastic. You guys, you just came up with the
it
PDS.
was
Well done.
it was definitely a little heavy-handed there. I'll give you that. But I was ignoring that and more interested in the other things that they were talking about. And they basically just don't even know what they're dealing with here, and so that also has a lot of repercussions because if in fact, as they're implying this is some sort of crazy supernatural thing, then they are kind of messing with that process. So, it, who knows what the results of that are going to be. The other big things that happened in this episode was a big divide between Kieran and his family. And Kieran has stopped wearing the makeup or the contacts. His family's very upset about it. And they're really taking a different side than we've seen them. And I'm still finding this, I don't know if I mean, obviously they were impacted by Kieran's narrative about his rising and how he felt when he was attacking people. And his dad especially has been impacted by this. It it doesn't ring entirely true to me, but I guess people can do things when they're scared. His dad basically just wants thing to still that everything's going to be normal, and Kieran's not letting him do that because he's walking around like a dead guy or an
So
undead guy.
Jem won't even stand in the room with him when he's got no makeup on. What I think that this is weird and unrealistic because his behavior, their behavior as a family, has been very inclusive. And yeah, and granted, they've been really in denial, like the whole pretending to eat at the dinner table thing and pretending that everything's normal. But his dad says some stuff like, "Oh man, I didn't, I thought our son was back, but maybe he was out there killing humans as a zombie." I'm like, yeah, of course he was. How do you
Well,
not even realize that he was out there killing people?
well, right, and also just how they're acting towards him doesn't seem like the supportive family that we've seen. Like this is the family that remember how they all banded together and they've been very supportive of him up until this point.
Yeah.
And you're it seems to me like they're I don't this seems like a little bit of drama for the sake of drama. Also, Jem saying she can't be in the room with him. She's seen him without his makeup before. This isn't the first time.
Hmm.
Like she's hung out with him when he's just been in his room and like it isn't like she hasn't ever seen him without it. So that's kind of strange.
They
And
must have
then,
been his parents must have been giving him his injections, so it's like they've all come face to face with his disease or his condition.
right. So I found this to be not really the Walker family that I knew and I don't find it fully believable. And I'm assuming that they're doing this so that there can be a big kumbaya moment at the end. But this was the only piece that didn't sit well with me in this particular episode.
Hmm.
Or maybe it's like yeah. And then the other part is that Kieran's been falsely accused of letting out the rabid zombies at the clinic, and they attacked a nurse. It's a lot of circumstantial evidence that, basically because he and Simon had been acting shady there a couple of days before, the nurse said that she thought it was them. But, they were having dinner with the Walker family that night. And I, Kieran is definitely falsely accused. Everybody wants him to sign a confession, and he won't do it. And he's very clear about that. And it has to be hard because he's been accused of this, and even his family isn't backing him up. So it doesn't feel like a very good place for him at the moment.
Dude, it's obviously not. Dean can just walk into their house and take him away, and they don't do anything.
Right.
His mother, is kind of accusing his dad of not standing up for him, and Steve, they've also been talking about how maybe the center is where he needs to be. Like he needs to be re-educated is kind of like the gist of at least what Steve is saying. But obviously his mother is very conflicted about this.
They are, and they keep saying it's his choice, but you can tell that it's just sort of weird that, they've stood up for him through seriously traumatic things and throughout, with Rick's death in the previous season and all sorts of other things. And I just feel like they wouldn't fall apart this quickly. Just my assessment. And then one of the other big things within this episode is Amy and her ongoing symptoms. She keeps having nosebleeds. She has what seems to be a seizure. And she doesn't really have anybody to talk about. To talk about it with Kieran. She tries to tell Kieran a little bit and tries to basically let him know it's okay that he's with Simon. But they never really get there. It's a very passive way of avoiding that conversation. And so she basically goes off to find Philip, which is interesting that Philip is now her. She's not confiding in him up until the end of this episode, but she's definitely around him and working through some philosophical things in her head.
Yeah. Well, he's unemployed, so he's also available, whereas Simon's out of town and Kieran is obviously dealing with some other stuff / under house arrest. So he does have a full plate. Philip has nothing going on. He's doing like toaster maintenance when she comes to his house.
Right. And he's still looking pretty pale.
Yeah.
So
that's just his thing. But they go and play what is got to be the most depressing round of mini golf or putt-putt or whatever. They call it crazy golf.
Crazy golf.
It is the most depressing course I've ever seen in my life. And obviously they try to play that up in this episode because there's like mud everywhere and it's just gray and grim. There's some interesting, metaphors going on with I want the game to last forever, but if nobody can win, is it really, what's the point? But then there's also, I was like, oh my God, this scene is so depressing. But then it ends with this kiss between Amy and Philip that's just super endearing, mostly because of Philip's reaction.
I know. It was very sweet. And that's the thing. It's like you have these scenes that are so dark and depressing, and then they turn it around and turn it on its head. And that's what the writers excel at doing that with this show. And then there's a little bit more of the religious element because we see a lot more flashbacks with Simon in how he gets reintroduced. His father basically comes to terms apparently and is going to let him come home. And he goes home and it's super awkward and horrible. And, his father doesn't want to talk about his mother. Then he does, then he doesn't, then he kicks Simon out. And then Simon has nowhere to go but the apostles. Now, they slipped him a secret note that basically said you don't belong where you are and you need to come and hang out with us. Yeah. Yep. And it's such a, they call themselves the apostles. The imagery is very much like the apostles. Like it's very Last Supper.
Yeah.
It's so hitting you over the head with that.
Yeah.
Although I did quite enjoy when Simon ends up meeting all the other apostles, there's some like super weird, awkward greetings with him.
Like they all just walk up and nod in his face and then walk away. It's very strange.
It's very strange. But
yeah. So, do you want to hear my conjecture here? I will throw out who I think the undead prophet is. I have two guesses.
Okay.
I think that it's either this other apostle guy, who's the one who delivered him the DVD in the beginning, and then is also like the one who stands in front of the table with his arms out and like, come and greet our new brother, that guy, whatever his name is. Or I think it's Dr. Halperin. Those are my two guesses. Because Dr. Halperin is the one who delivers his bag of belongings when he's like, you're free to go home. And I think that the note from the undead prophet, the ULA, is clearly visible in the bag when he hands it to Simon.
Oh, interesting.
That is, yeah. And then, as you mentioned, like it could just be a huge manipulation scheme to control PDS folk and potentially to make them kill themselves or somehow, So those are my two guesses. It's either that the other apostle, because he seems to be the only guy who has contact with the undead prophet, or Halperin because it's some kind of dark scheme.
I didn't think he felt like a plant in the same room as Simon, so I felt like I thought the same thing, and then I was thinking he felt more like somebody that was planted there to say certain things to him. So I guess he could be the undead prophet, but it feels much more government to me in trying to control the PDS sufferers or somehow bring forth some specific agenda. And, we don't know what's going to happen here, but the other huge thing that happens in this episode with Amy is that she has made a point of the fact that she doesn't feel anything. And then at the end of this episode, in a very interesting scene, she does.
Mm-hmm.
And, all along, Amy has been thinking that she's getting sicker, that she's going to go rabid. There's been a ton of flyers going around basically saying that if you have nosebleeds and tremors, that the neurotriptyline is no longer working, that you become immune to it, and you're going to go rabid at any moment. So she basically packs up her pup tent to go into some field, and she has Philip meet her there and tells him that she wants him to kill her. And I really enjoy the fact that she has a pair of pink fuzzy handcuffs by which to restrain herself. It's pretty awesome. And this was such a great scene. Like, Philip is so upset. It's like he keeps being like, I want to go and get somebody, and then he isn't. Like, he's really trying to be there for her, but is so traumatized because he doesn't want to do what she's asking him to do, which is to kill her. So, but at the very end, never fear, gentle audience. She does not die because she feels the rain on her face. So, what does this mean? Does it mean that they are becoming more human?
Who knows what the future holds?
And then also, the big semi-reveal is that Maxine now has an eyewitness who has seen the first rising and tells her who the first risen is. And I guess we have to assume it's not Kieran, or they would have just showed her pointing to him. So it's somebody we don't know. My guess is Amy. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. Who knows? I don't know. Yeah, this is just more of the suspense. The thing is, so the Undead Prophet wants Simon to kill the first risen at noon on December 12th, which also happens to be during the village fete, whatever you want to call it. Their big fair where they mostly sell jam. It just feels super. I don't know. Like I don't understand where this mythology is coming from. Still, like this is an ongoing problem for me.
Me too. Like, it feels a little bit forced, and there's so many little hints at mysteries that are just kind of like, well, we're just going to throw it out there and add information in, but it's not the most elegant way to reveal. So, I think some of this is, how do you fit all this stuff into 6 episodes? And I know that they did a ton with just 3 in the first series, but I think that that's part of the problem that is happening here.
Well, they're trying to tell a bigger story now, and I think that, like, they are spreading it out. They're making it more regional, but yeah, it's this part of it is not as polished as I would like. But then I guess at the end of the episode, what we also have is Simon, after sitting in a corner of his hotel room with his terrible hotel art, comes back to town, unrolls this bag of knives he's been given, and appears to look like he's about to go take care of some business, which might be the assassination of Kieran.
Right. And Maxine now is on the scent, and we know now that the person she's trying to resurrect in a second rising is her brother. So...
Do we know that? How do we know that?
Well, she keeps mentioning she has a brother, so I'm assuming that's who she's getting all weepy over.
Oh.
The little bed and breakfast woman talks to her, and she says, it's something about her brother, and then gets all, like, kind of quiet and strange. So I'm guessing that has to be who she's distraught over.
All right, well, we'll see, I guess.
Her younger brother.
I think she's a prime candidate to die this season, Maxine.
Yeah. But anyway, I can't wait to wrap this up. I'm really excited to see how they do this. I'm also very much hoping. I would still love to see, at this point, I would still love to see a 3rd series, but maybe this next episode is a true finale. So we'll see.
If everybody ends up dead, then we'll know.
All right. Well, that is it.
Oh wait, I've got one more thing to say.
Okay.
The actor who plays Simon, I was binging on some Netflix earlier this week, watching The Fall, which is a Netflix original starring Gillian Anderson of The X-Files, playing a flawlessly English accented detective inspector, blah blah. who has come from England to Belfast to help on some murders. It's a serial murderer investigation drama. It's short, like 5 episodes. Each episode's about an hour. And the actor who plays Simon, his name is Emmett Scanlon.
What a great name.
It's a good name. He has a role. He's a policeman in the Belfast Police Department. And it's not a huge role, but he has a nice, a handlebar mustache, and he's kind of like he's a funny guy, kind of that works with Gillian Anderson, and I have a feeling that his character will come back if they do a second season of that show, and I hope they do, because it was really good. And HA, I would recommend it to you if you're into police procedurals that are a little dark. It feels a little bit like The Killing, except in Ireland, so more political. It's very good.
Have you ever seen Ripper Street?
I have not.
Oh, you should check that out. It is entertaining. I think it's going on season 3 now. We're waiting for it. But if you like, I do like procedural dramas. Procedural anything.
Is it a time period drama?
It is, and it's basically about this detective, and it is around the time of obviously the Jack the Ripper murders, and it's set in Whitechapel, and they are exploring just different. It's sort of they're trying to show the birth of forensic procedure and that kind of thing. And it's pretty well done, and it has a lot of familiar faces in it. So you may did you ever watch the British show Spooks?
Negative.
Okay, because it has Matthew McFadden in it, and then also Jerome Flynn, who plays Bronn in Game of Thrones.
Okay.
And he has a really big role in that, and he's awesome. So I highly recommend. So I will check out The Fall, and you check out Ripper Street.
Will do. No zombies in either of these shows.
No. But Ripper Street is pretty dark.
Excellent.
All right. Well, I look forward to wrapping up In the Flesh. And anything else to add, mister?
Yeah, we've got some... we're going to be featuring a little bit of music this episode by a band called The Karova's Milkshake, and the song is called Zombie Walk. WOK. And that's with the Creative Commons license, just to spice it up a bit. They don't have much music in the Flesh, so I just a splash of color.
Nice. And if our gentle audience, zombie fans, have anything they'd like to hear us review or anything to add, feel free to email us at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, or you can throw out a comment on Twitter. We're at reanimatedpcast there. And I think that is it. So until next time, Stuart, have a great rest of your week.
You too, AJ. And we will reconvene and finish out this season 2 of In the Flesh. Looking forward to it.
Me too. Ciao.
Until then, bye-bye.
Keeps her hungry monsters.